like to introduce Byron Black here, who's the process control manager from Rockwell Automation. And I'd like to introduce Travis Cox, who's in the dark blue shirt, who's the director of training for inductive automation. And I'd also like to introduce Jeff Trupser, who's the operations and safety enterprise account executive for Siemens Energy. And I'd just like to say, too, that I really do appreciate the people, particularly the people that come out of operations and come and speak, because it's very, very hard today to get people out of operations to do this kind of thing. So it's very much appreciated. So, I think that deserves an extra recognition for these people. So let's start with a few questions. I'm sure somebody in the audience has a question. And if you don't, I can always ask one of that. Okay. Yeah, I knew we had one.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, it seems like all of you are doing real passive reports, passive EMI. Do you have any plans to, or have you looked into doing active? Meaning with smartphones and new technology, you can actually, if something comes up, alert the operator, or not so much an operator, but maintenance, but give them information so they don't have to go to a screen. They may not go there till the end of the shift, but actually be active about alerting them. Have you thought about that, or do you plan to implement that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, the mics. Sorry.
I've got one here.
Okay.
I'm time sharing. Everything on those screens is active. So when we ever have an alert, there's emails that will go into the system so we can alert subscribing. The alerts, the boards, we have large monitors overhead that have our KPIs up, so they will see, instrument safety systems that are put in bypass. They know the numbers. They can drill into it. So there is visual alerts. One thing I was very concerned about, we put this in Commerce City first, and then we moved it up to our Edmonton refinery. They took all of our templates. They were literally up in weeks, even though they have different historian, different everything. But what I was getting to is I was really concerned because I looked at their hit rate. They commissioned after some intense testing and everything else because they were kind of skeptical about it. They're running over 43,000 hits on their system a month. And it was significantly higher than mine, and I couldn't figure it out. And all of a sudden what I realized was that they're new up there, so they kept hitting it, where in our facility people are just parking the screens, and that's what they're looking at all the time, which I was thrilled at, to know that they were watching it. But all of the alerts, all of the monitors, everything is real time. So they are getting the notifications, they're seeing the exclamation points, they see everything just like they would see it on a DCS screen.
Anybody else want to answer? Okay. I have another mic. You don't have to share too much here.
I just want to say, as a vendor, we're investigating new technologies such as Google Glass, a lot of wearables, and these are the next wave of technology that will be out there. And for a guy, let's say a plant for operators who's in the trenches, if you will, having Google Glass on there and being notified daily or when alarms occur right there, and to be able to be directed to the next thing to take a look at will be, I think, a pretty cool technology. That it works. It's just when it's going to be commercially available.
Okay. Anybody else want to take a step? Okay. Oh.
We have mobility within our facility, and so that was one of the things within the architecture, is that everything that is delivered online is available on a mobile device. We use an Intermec industrial device, and we are looking at a Motorola wearable, which is a intrinsically safe Google Glass. But that's where we cross the line. There's one thing to have information available when it's needed, but from a process safety and safety in the environment, that was found to be too intrusive. and operators, and from a safety perspective, they said no.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other questions from the audience? No, I'm surprised. But so I guess one question I have is, when you were doing these implementations, what did you find was the most challenging? Was it operator acceptance, or was it more the technology integration, or what were some of the issues? If you want to comment, any of the people that... Yeah.
For our implementation, a lot of it had to do with the stakeholder involvement and being able to achieve or identify information or just pieces of data that they would find important and put it in a way that would make it useful for them. You know, it's easy for them to say, build me a report or get me this, but they have to be involved in the process, right? So there is definitely requirements that we would put on our internal stakeholders to ensure that, you know, we're delivering what it is they need and not just get me a report. So there's definitely that piece that's required. So that's the biggest thing, is getting their buy-in to be part of that solution.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment?
Yeah. I'd also like to say, like, operator buy-in has been a huge issue because you got to make sure we had to add steps to our process to get this to work. And even though they no longer have to fill out the paperwork, it's still another step that they have to do, or a different step. So they have to be comfortable with what you're doing. So that does seem to be an issue. But one thing that I thought was going to be an issue, which wasn't, was IT. IT was very on board with what we did, and they've been with it every step of the way. So that was a huge help.
Yeah, I was going to comment that from an integration perspective, one of the key challenges, as Bruce mentioned, was the fact that you have so many stakeholders, and those stakeholders have to be brought together in a forum where they actively discuss the workflow. So the data is one important element. It's understanding the questions behind the data, and then it's also asking or identifying or documenting the use case that involves the workflow around the context of the data. So it's bringing all those people together, it's having that dialogue and discussion, and it's doing that in the context of a project, because a lot of times after you have that dialogue with those stakeholders, you'll find that the requirements of the data have changed, because all of a sudden you're doing different things with the data than you originally imagined maybe going in as the original idea. So it evolves. It's got to be an iterative thing, something that typically, if you could do a short pilot or a proof of concept to get ideas up and get the information flowing, that becomes a very helpful tool.
Bruce?
Yeah, one build on that too is when you get everybody in a room, there's a new term that comes to the forefront: transparency. And all of a sudden there's no secrets anymore. There's no ability to massage or manipulate Excel spreadsheets into what actually gets populated at the end of the month. And it's kind of a two-edged sword with transparency, in that transparency is definitely a good thing, but with it becomes a certain amount of responsibility that managers don't react adversely to what they're seeing without allowing the normal procedures and reactions to take place, so that if they see that there's an upset or a constraint that gets put into the system, that they're not picking up the phone demanding answers, but allow and understand that if they see it, the entire organization sees it, and that cross-functionally everybody is already addressing the problem, so get out of the way and let the process mature. And so transparency is a real thing to get management around, that everybody's going to know everything.
Okay, any other comments or anything? Does anybody want to have any closing remarks or something that they'd like to add? Okay, we have one over here. Wait a minute.
So as you're looking at your KPIs and developing those KPIs, I guess, question particularly to Bruce, what kind of guiding principles were you looking at, and how do you harmonize those guiding principles across the various stakeholders? Because what you just described had pretty much every aspect, functional aspect of your facility involved.
That's exactly to Jeff's point. We did have to first create a vision. And we didn't even, when we went in, and this is the way succeeded in approaching it, is if you go in presenting technology, you're going to fail. Okay? So you create an operational vision for the organization and basically put it out that cross-functional contribution, transparency, the things that you're trying to achieve to stimulate this repetitive, passionate performance of, in a strive for operational excellence. And if you put it in those terms, then all of a sudden, who's going to stand up and say, I don't want that? Okay? And then go into each of the organizations and what is your contribution to this overall functional operational excellence across the organization? Because at the end of the day, everybody is linked to everybody. And when you start talking about operational excellence, you can't be operationally excellent in maintenance alone. It's a tide that has to raise all of the components together. So you have to create that vision around operational excellence and what you're trying to achieve with cross-functional harmonization. And if you do it at a principle-based level without inducing the technology, if you go in and you say, I'm going to put in technology, I'm going to build dashboards and screens, everybody goes into their silo mode. So if you deal with it and get an agreement about what the vision is and what you're trying to achieve, then everybody starts understanding what the dependencies are, between the groups, and then they start to contribute. Or that's been my experience.
Okay. Any other comments? Anybody? Any other questions?
I can do a closing comment here. I think earlier today, one of the suppliers, I think, introduced EMI as a platform for continuous improvement, and I think that's clearly the case. We see many, many times where this is an entry point for making better reports and then evolving into more of a collaborative tool to help drive performance. The next step we see is going beyond that, and now that you see the numbers and now that you know where you are relative to where you might need to be, the low-hanging fruit is to identify the gaps between where you are and where you want to be and to assign an economic value to those gaps. So maybe you're looking at operating envelopes and trying to drive the operational performance, and when you put that into economic terms, it helps rank order the things that are the most important to the organization. So it provides, again, this framework for really driving performance and throughout the entire collaborative organization to really drive out what the real critical items are, the top 5 things that everybody ought to be working on, and not dealing with all the lower level types of things that need to be done. The other comment I had is that when you do these kinds of implementations, you're not going to be a popular person. No one wants to give up their favorite Excel spreadsheet, and they're going to hold that thing until either you go away or something else happens. So our vision is really to be able to provide that Excel spreadsheet to have the end users, whoever they might be, on their cell phone, on their workstation, wherever they might be, any day, any time, on any device, to be able to build these types of reports or insights at the runtime anywhere. So it's moving it out of the physical being and be able to provide those kinds of insights on all sorts of different devices when they want to do it, when it's the most important, and that's when something is emerging. And that's where the biggest value is, so that if you can get to that problem before it emerges and turns into something bigger, that's where you, again, save a lot of additional value.
Yeah, just to kind of echo what Jeff had there. With Rockwell, we're, it's more than technology. It's the cultural change that, that companies are going through that we're trying to be aware of, trying to future-proof the technology that we apply, but also being aware of the fact that there's significant changes in human behavior that that Bruce talked about earlier as well. So having the technology available 5, 10, 15 years from now, and how does that evolve into glass or other types of mobility is always a challenge from the supplier side. So being at these conferences helps expose us to some of the things that we see and the users are asking for.
Okay. All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming this afternoon, especially we're kind of between you and going to Universal Studios. And I want to thank our speakers again. I think they did a terrific job, and I do think there's a lot of value in EMI, and I do think that these people attested to that, and that was the theme that I saw running through the whole program today. So thank you again, and thank you to your companies. We really do appreciate it.